We're
We are live.
live already. It's not our usual Monday. We have a special guest today. I'm very excited about it. We had my honor to be both with Dr. Philip Ovadia here on our employee wellness live stream, as well as Nina Teicholz. Welcome, Nina, and great to see you, Phil. Before we get started, I do have one housekeeping note here for all our listeners. Is this show, as our other live streams, is not intended for personal or individual medical advice. If you'd like to know more about working with our team at Ovadia Heart Health, please do reach out to us at team@ifixhearts.com. This live stream is intended really for education and inspiration only. So that was my housekeeping. Philip, would you like to kick it off as our honored guest here with Nina today?
Yeah, sure thing. It's great to have now Dr. Nina Teicholz with us. I'm sure that everyone is familiar with her, but for anyone who isn't, just a little bit of context and background for this discussion. Nina has just been a warrior when it comes to trying to get changes made to the U.S. Dietary Guidelines. And this is a battle that she's been fighting for well over a decade now. And it's 2025. It's the 5-year cycle when the guidelines are due to be updated. And so we wanted to bring her on to talk a little bit about what's going on with that process and what you all in the audience can do to help, because there is definitely an opportunity here for the public to get involved and to make your voice heard about what you want reflected in these guidelines. So Nina, why don't you maybe catch us up on what's going on with the guidelines and what are some of the challenges that we're facing?
Yeah, maybe just I'm going to try to step back and set the larger context for your listeners and viewers, which is like, why do the guidelines even matter? What is this policy in government? Who cares? And I didn't know what it was, and had no, I didn't understand how powerful it was and how much it influences all of our lives. It is it's like the North Star of nutrition. Is a policy that's issued by our governments. It's by law, must be followed by all federal assistance programs with food. So, why are the school lunches for your kids so terrible? The food in nursing homes, the programs for the military, and the military has an obesity problem equal to or almost equal to the general population. So it has a huge effect on all these people who get government food. And also they're downloaded as the gold standard. These guidelines are the gold standard for doctors, nutritionists, dietitians, nurses. So even though you may not go to a .gov website to get your dietary advice, they're coming to you. You just don't realize it. I mean, if you've been told your whole life, eat more fruits, vegetables, whole grains, lean meat, low fat, dairy, nuts, and seeds to get healthy or reverse disease, that is you getting the dietary guidelines. That's just sort of what is considered a healthy diet. That really comes from this top-down policy that we have. So why did I become so obsessed with this? Well, I could see how hard it was for people to try alternative approaches. Like, first of all, we can't get any kind of good food into schools, right? Kids are only allowed like 3 eggs a week because of our dietary guidelines. And I would see people go to their doctors and, all they're getting is the same advice, even though many people try very hard and are not successful with this way of eating in reversing their disease. In fact, as a nation as a whole, we really have followed the guidelines. I mean, it's very common to hear like, oh, who cares? Nobody follows the guidelines and everybody just eats junk food, ultra processed food. But if you look at the best available government statistics from 1970 until just recently, like we have dramatically reduced the amount of like red meat, 28% less, whole milk, 79% less, butter, 19% less. It's the same with all animal fats are down. All those are down. Everything we've been told to reduce, we eat less of. And everything, every category measured of foods we've been told to eat more of, we eat more of. We eat like 20 to 30% more fruits and vegetables than we did in 1970. We eat 35% more grains. We eat overall 30% more carbohydrates. We've reduced our fat. Like we have done a pretty good job of following the guidelines. And I'm sure all of your listeners or viewers know that many of them have tried to really eat healthy, eat well, and they just steadily gained weight. I myself was doing that and not able to maintain a healthy weight. So what we're asking for, and this is what I've been asking for really for the past decade, is for the guidelines to follow the current science, to just allow an option, not a mandate for everyone, but an option of a lower carbohydrate diet, right? Currently, the guidelines say you have to eat 6 to 7 servings of grains a day, including 3 servings of refined grains. Up to 10% of your calories is sugar. What we're asking for is just a line in the guidelines saying, for people with chronic diseases or without, it is an option to follow a low carbohydrate diet. That then opens the door for doctors to prescribe it, for maybe lower carbohydrate diets in schools, in districts where they have a lot of obesity, in hospitals. We're currently, when you go, even the diabetic meals are just super high in breads and seed oils. And so we're saying allow a lower carbohydrate option. So that's the basic ask that has been going on for a while now. We know the science supports it. The science has supported it for more than a decade. We know that the government agency in charge of guidelines, USDA, reviewed low carbohydrate diets back in 2020 and then buried that review. We know they know about it, but they just have been reluctant to actually put it into the guidelines for, we could talk a whole hour about why, but they've been reluctant to make this an option. And it really needs to, because it's based on solid, good science. It reverses disease, and we are a sick nation. We are not a nation of healthy people. So we need to have this option.
And for our listeners, if you're wanting to take action and you're wanting to, we're going to point you towards the website. I believe it's lowcarbmaha.org. And there's a lot of information on there, correct, Nina? You've got even some visuals that you can download, but also just to make your voice heard, correct?
Yes. I mean, it has some graphics you can use. It has some language you can use. It has a little bit of background. And we're just suggesting or asking people, if they care about this issue, to get on social media, tag some of the people that we suggest tagging, especially on X, where this administration lives, and let them know this is something you'd like guidelines. I've had a little bit of exposure to what's going on in the back rooms for the formulation of the guidelines in Washington, D.C., and I can tell you this is on the table as an option, but there's, of course, a lot of resistance. And so I think it's important that people make their voices be heard so that the administration officials know, like, the public really cares about this. The public wants to be healthy. They want to have this option. They shouldn't go to their doctor when they have diabetes and be told that they can have pancakes and maple syrup and cover it with insulin, and not be told that they can be much healthier by just ratcheting down the amount of sugars and starches that they eat. So go out on social media, tag a few people, tell your story, say that this is what you want. Literally, we're just saying, can this be an option? Not a mandate, an option.
Yeah, I think that's a great way to approach this. And Like you said, we're not looking for low carb to be the default, but it is at this, if not the most, among the most well-studied dietary strategies, especially in terms of addressing the diseases, the chronic illnesses that we're struggling with, and getting this at least into conversation is a start. So obviously, Robert F. Kennedy is intimately involved in this process. He has publicly talked about his diet, right, which very much contradicts U.S. dietary guidelines. One of the things that's interesting about the guidelines, if you actually down and you read the report, and you don't need to read the full report, which is a monster, we'll be honest, it comes out every 5 years, but I believe right on page 1 or 2, it says, these guidelines are not intended to treat any disease, right? They're really intended to give a guide to people that are healthy how to eat. And that is
yeah.
And that's an incredibly shrinking part of our population, right? So from that lens, the guidelines would appear not to really apply to most people, yet it's sort of forced on a lot of people, like I said, through all of those various programs. I guess I'd just love to hear your thoughts on what do you think guidelines should be aiming for? Should this be advice for healthy people how to remain healthy? Should this be advice that may help people that are not healthy get healthy? What would you love to see, how the guidelines could maybe that?
Yeah, I mean, this is where so when the guidelines were launched in 1980, they were for prevention only. We were largely healthy population. Obesity rates for adults were in the low teens. So they said, we're going to prevent chronic disease. It was only for prevention, not for treatment. And the law that allows the guidelines to exist says the guidelines have to be for the general public. Okay, so in 1980, the general public was healthy. All that made sense. The general public is now sick. I mean, choose your number. 88% of us are metabolically unhealthy. That's the number from about a decade ago. A more recent number is 93% have signs of metabolic disease, some kind of metabolic disease like diabetes, obesity. We are a sick nation. There's no question about it. So we have this mismatch between the guidelines and our population. The general public, which by law, the guidelines has to serve, the general public is sick. So the guidelines won't even, they won't be complying with the law if they don't have an option for treatment of metabolic diseases. The government agency in charge of the guidelines, as I said, USDA, they do this like bit of government double speak where they're like, well, we're prevention only, but we're for all Americans. Well, tell them, I mean, I don't see how that really computes or how that you can square that circle. I mean, it really is, it doesn't make any sense. So we have a policy that does not match our current population. And again, because it is so powerful, because its tentacles extend to so many programs that by law have to follow them, it really needs to be a more flexible policy with a range of options that reflect the range of metabolism in the US. I mean, the guidelines are, they go to pains to say, we are appropriate for a range of ethnicities and ages and diverse backgrounds. But what about the range of the state of metabolic health, right? It is not, it needs to be appropriate for the full spectrum of Americans who range from a vanishingly smaller and smaller proportion of healthy people over to, the majority of us, again, we're not well. So we can't eat 6 to 7 servings of grains every day and maintain our good health. I mean, I think we have enough knowledge now to know that huge load of carbohydrates or starches coming into the body really cannot be processed if you have a broken metabolism, which you do if you have obesity, diabetes, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. Your metabolism just cannot handle that load of carbohydrates.
And this brings up a really important point as you talk about whether we at the 88% of Americans do not have good metabolic health or even less right now. And many people associate, we also offer programs with Ovadia Heart Health on an individual in our private medical practice. We're working also with companies to help them. And even if a company doesn't have, let's say, a strict nutrition policy, they're very much influenced by the guidelines because that's what's given in hospitals. As you mentioned, it's given in hospitals. Their kids are receiving this at school. They're by osmosis sort of think, well, this is a healthy diet. And we've seen this as we've gone in with companies that you're still fighting a little bit of an uphill battle when you talk about even just offering an option. And this is basically a lot of what your work is, to bring the low carb as an option. And we want to remind individuals, anyone listening, if you would like to see this as an option, please make your voice heard on social media, talk to other people, and knowing, let's say, I know we're not going to talk about your book, The Big Fat Surprise, but we hope all of our listeners have it in their library. This was back in 2014, right, when you had it published?
Yeah.
So you've been doing this work. There's the science in the book, but the science we know also out in the greater community. Besides making yourself vocal, what are some other, let's say, tools that individuals could do to help support the movement?
Well, I think at this point, with the focal point on the guidelines, which I haven't mentioned, are coming out literally in a matter of weeks. Really, what we're at, the main ask at this point is to do something on social media and to tag the folks who we put in the tags for people who are the agencies that are involved and even individuals who are involved. So really, that is the focus right now. And again, it's the dietary guidelines are such a key lever for what people think is a healthy diet, or what they're allowed to eat, or what they're fed. So this is really the call to action right now. I think
and it's important.
You can also read my book at some point. I mean, the whole history is still true. Like, it's still true. If you don't understand why we believe that saturated fat is bad, how we got into the low fat diet, why how we got started on this whole idea of a healthy diet that has lasted for 65 years now, it's still worth a read to understand, where does that come from? What are the politics and the personalities and the science that led to that becoming this entrenched dogma and conventional wisdom that we still live with today? So, some people like understanding that history and they need to see it all. And so it's still relevant. Unfortunately, I thought maybe things would have changed by now.
Right. It's definitely still relevant. And we would encourage, if anyone has a question or comment. I see Dog Paw states that the dietary guidelines will make a healthy person unhealthy. Certainly that was my case. I had a similar story to you, Nina, as being a long time, I don't know how long you were, but I was 20 years vegetarian, followed all the things. And while I didn't gain weight, I got extremely metabolically poor health, lots of joint issues, inflammation. And I think it's important for individuals to understand, when we're talking about having low carbohydrate as an option, we're not just talking about a weight issue here. We're talking about metabolic health, all kinds of various chronic diseases. And Dr. Philip can talk more about that with our heart patients, but how we see individuals really reverse many conditions, from autoimmune diseases to poor, just general, inflammatory issues, IBS, you name it, there are issues that also can benefit from having other options.
And Dr. Phil, I'd be interested in hearing from you what your experience is as a doctor in recommending to your patients an alternative nutritional approach, one that is not condoned by our official public health bodies, because that's one of the reasons that I think changing the guidelines is so important, because I know of stories, multiple stories of doctors, nutritionists who want to provide their patients with unconventional advice, say carbohydrate reduction, and they are penalized for that in some way or another. They're called before a disciplinary panel. They have to jump through a lot of extra hoops. They find themselves marginalized in some way. So I'm curious if you've had anything like that experience or have heard of anybody.
Yeah, so it's definitely a concern for physicians, right? Physicians operate in an environment that has become very potentially punitive when going against the mainstream, right? And the push in medicine has been around, following the guidelines and what's called evidence-based medicine, although we can argue whether it's actually based in any evidence. But it does make it challenging, and those of us who have, chosen for the benefit of our patients, right, to go against those. It can be scary, I'll say, for a physician to do that. And there are, unfortunately, some examples of physicians who have been, had to defend their actions, whether it be with licensing boards or just in the public sphere. That can be something that many physicians aren't willing to do. Thankfully, right, we now have organizations like the Society of Metabolic Health Practitioners that have put out white papers that physicians like myself can now point to and say, there is a standard around this, right? There is evidence behind it. And, I also have that default, right? In some ways, what we talked about earlier about these guidelines being explicit that they do not apply to patients that have diseases gives me a little bit of an out, right? Because I can now say, well, how could I prescribe those guidelines, those dietary guidelines, when they clearly say they're not intended to treat disease, and all my patients have disease, right? Or they wouldn't
Right.
be seeing me. So, but we need to better be able to support the practitioners of all sorts, not just physicians, who have come to recognize the shortfalls of the guidelines and be able to introduce this more broadly, right, into the medical education system. That's another big barrier, right? We talk about how little education most physicians get around nutrition. And then we run into the problem of, if they are educated on nutrition, it's almost guaranteed to be centered on these guidelines.
Yeah. Well, I know a story of a medical student who was in class. The professor was teaching the dietary guidelines for their, I guess, 1 hour of nutrition that they had in the course of their entire 4-year education. And after class, the student goes up to the professor and says, hey, have you heard about the ketogenic diet? It's really helped me, and I've been reading about it. And the professor says, well, I myself am on the ketogenic diet, but I'm not allowed to teach it. So that's the kind of stranglehold we're talking about. There clearly just needs to be more diversity of thought and knowledge, and there's just no reason that we should have such a small stranglehold on what is considered the one appropriate way to eat. I mean, that is clearly not reflective of a diverse population with diverse needs. I mean, people say to me all the time, like, well, why do we even need guidelines? Let's just get rid of them. It was a terrible idea. And that is probably true. I mean, if you look at obesity in America, which is going along in the low teens, and then 1980, the dietary guidelines start, and the obesity rate turns sharply upwards. It's really a very striking correlation.
Yes, that graph is
not causation, but it suggests that the guidelines really caused our epidemics of metabolic disease, and I think there's a plausible hypothesis there, supported by quite a bit of evidence. But we can't get rid of the guidelines, just the way it's so hard to get rid of any program in government. I mean, you cannot claw back an enormous bureaucracy once it's entrenched. If only we could like click our fingers and make it go away. But as long as it exists, it should be closer to the science. It should be right. And so that's, unfortunately we have guidelines, and they really have to be right so that people can start getting healthy again.
Yeah. We have a question from one listener, Yuri Gabe. I'm not sure I'm pronouncing his name correctly. I may have an idea, but where is the resistance in updating the current dietary guidelines actually coming from?
Well, I mean, there is an update happening right now. So Department of Health and Human Services is leading this, and they do it together with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's a very closely held process. So there's not a lot of transparency around it about who is arguing for what and who is pushing back on what. FDA Commissioner Marty McCary has said multiple times he does not think that the cap on saturated fats is based on good evidence. And so there's a suggestion that that long-standing cap, which is 10% of total calories as saturated fats, that cap will be eliminated, which would be completely revolutionary, amazing. That's all we really know publicly, though. We can only speculate on who's pushing back, and we know from some of the research that I've done, especially into the conflicts of interest at U.S. Department of Agriculture, we know that ultra-processed food companies like Unilever, like Mondelez, Nestle, Dana, and these giant multinational food companies, they really have a strong foothold in the guideline process. We know the soy, corn, wheat farmers have strong presence in the USDA. I think it was the last administration, the president of the American Soybean Association went into USDA as an undersecretary for 4 years. And then, I mean, in a perfect example of the revolving door, no time lapse, went right out of USDA to back being president of the American Soybean Association. So, and the U.S. Department of Agriculture is its stakeholders, the folks it's supposed to serve are American farmers and ranchers. But, those large mega farms, the row crop farmers are very powerful, and they're in every state, wheat, sugar, cotton, corn, soy. I mean, all of those they're strong, big interests in Washington, D.C. And while we might be putting out our voices or doing whatever we can, or the time that I've spent in DC is nothing compared to the fact that there are all these lobbyists who live in DC and do this day in and day out. I mean, that's their entire career, is to influence government policy, including the dietary guidelines.
It's definitely a powerful voice. And again, want to just keep reminding our listeners to make your voice heard if this is something you feel is important, whether you're concerned about foods in our educational system, or I would call it food-like substances that are currently in our educational system, the same as hospitals, within the military, The dietary guidelines have influenced so much of our society, and people may not even be aware of it. We had one more question here, I believe here. Where are we on intercepting the current guidelines in the 11th hour in the federal bureaucracy?
Where are we? We know they're being debated and they're not finalized. So there's still a chance that our voices can be heard. I just think it's important to let these public officials know. They hear from lobbyists day in, day out. They should know that the public also really cares about this policy and wants it to serve them, the public. So I think it's still feasible to make a difference. And I think it's worth spending 5 minutes or so on social media and just letting our government officials know that there's a really sizable population of American citizens who truly want to see an option for them.
Yeah, definitely. So, again, this is supposed to be a government of the people, right? By the people and for the people. And this is an opportunity for people to let their voices be heard. And so we encourage everyone, again, go to low-carb-maha.org and get your voices out there.
And, also we will put up, because as my lovely colleague Jen Cleveland put in the comments, we still have a long road ahead. We're trying to push that needle farther here at Ovadia Heart Health with our private medical practice with the brilliant Dr. Ovadia, as well as our employee wellness programs. And we are not your conventional program. We do have low carb, ketogenic, carnivore as an option within our programs, helping companies understand the science behind it. Please reach out to us if you'd like to know more about our employee wellness efforts. We also have some white papers on our website that you can download for free if you want more information on non-conventional thinking. Any sort of last thoughts, Nina, for us, or calls to action that we can help you? We all, as I said before at the start, we're big fans, all of us. I'm waiting one day to get my autograph copy. I missed you in 2014 in the Bay Area, but I'll be at the next one. Any last thoughts for us?
No, I really appreciate your having me on your podcast, and I think we've really covered it. And I also want to say I'm so grateful to you all for all you're doing. It seems like your practice is thriving, and I'm sure you have very lucky patients. So congrats to you.
Very good, Nina. Well,
you.
thank you. Thank you for all the great work you've been doing on this effort. And again, just one last time, we'll encourage everyone, go to low-carb-maha.org, take some action, and make your voices heard so we can get these changes made.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Nina, and keep up the good fight.
Thanks, you too. Bye.